Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's Scrutiny Board meeting of the Children and Families. My name is Billy Flynn. I'm chairman of the board of this particular committee anyway, and I'm also a councillor for Adler Wharfdale Ward. Just to remind you that the meeting is webcast, so that if anyone isn't able to get in, they're able to see us sort of remotely, so please bear that in mind. And if I could ask everybody, remind everybody again, could you speak directly into the mics? It's quite difficult for the elderly guys at the top here to hear sometimes, so please do bear with us, all right? As is normal, if we can start with introductions going from the left.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Karen Renshaw from Alton Robin Hood.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Mahaley France Meir from Moortown and Meanwood.
Tony Brinton, representing the Roman Catholic Diocese of Leeds.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's Councillor David Jenkins from Killingbeck and Seacroft.
Afternoon, Councillor John Garvani, Horsforth Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Ankila Manaka for Bermontoft and Richmond Hill.
Hi, my name is Councillor Jules Hesselwood, representing Wheatwood Ward.
Afternoon, I'm Emma Flint, also from Wheatwood Ward.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Oliver Edwards from Guysey and Rawton.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Helen Hayden, Temple Newsom Ward, and Executive Member for Children and Families.
Good afternoon, Dan Barton, Deputy Director for Learning, representing the Children and Families Directorate.
Hello, Rebecca McCormack, Chief Officer for Education.
Good afternoon, everyone. Farah Khan, Deputy Director for Children's Social Care.
Good afternoon, everyone. Phil Evans, Deputy Director for Resources and Transformation.
Good afternoon, Kate Blacker, Co-opted Member.
Maria Adams, Leeds Parent Carer Forum.
Councillor David Blackburn, finally in Wortley Ward, substituting for Tim Goodall.
Hi everyone, Ryan Stevenson, Councillor for Harewood Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Rick Downs, Otley Eden Ward.
Hello everyone, I'm Rob Clayton, I'm the Scrutiny Advisor to the board.
Thank you all very much indeed. Just a very warm welcome to Councillor France Mayor, this is her first meeting of the Scrutiny Board. And Dan, nice to see you back in harness. Lovely to see you again, all right? Moving on to the main agenda, Rob, could you take us through items 1 to 5?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I can. These are the usual standard items of business that all scrutiny boards consider. So item 1 is appeals against refusal of inspection of documents, and there are no appeals against those today, Chair. Item 2 is items for exclusion, and there is no exempt information on today's agenda. Item 3 is late items of business, and there are no late items today, Chair. Item 4 is declarations of interest, and I will briefly pause to allow any members to declare any under Leeds City Council's Code of Conduct. I shall take silence as none. Item 5 is apologies, Chair, and we have apologies today from Councillor Goodall, with Councillor Blackburn attending as a substitute, Councillor Khan, and then from our co-opted members, some of our co-opted members, Helen Bellamy, Anas Kittu, Shanaz Gull, Andrew Graham, and then lastly, Chair, we have apologies from Julie Longworth, Director of Children and Families. Thank you.
Right, thanks very much indeed, Rob. Moving on to item 6, which is the minutes of the last meeting. I won't confuse you at this meeting. I used different page numbers last time. In the agenda pack, the minutes start on page 7. So I won't use any page numbers this time to avoid any confusion. Has anybody got any comments on the first page of the minutes, which start on page 7 of the papers? Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. Page 11. Councillor Blackburn.
On the item 10, Cowinsway Primary School, since that since that meeting, we've had a deputation from support staff. I noticed there's no indications here that for lessons learned that there were anything to do with support staff. So I hope that's going to be included at some stage. But also, when are we going to get the results from the deputation back? And is it coming here?
Who did the deputation? The deputation came to council. Yeah, okay. Anybody from Children and Families, Councillor Hayden?
It's a deputation like all others, so it goes to the Director of Children and Families, and then who responds directly back to the deputies. But maybe Councillor Flint can give more procedural.
Yeah, we'll all be informed of the response that is sent to the Director, but given that full council was only a couple of weeks ago, there's still time for that response. So, you know, it's not included in here for the reason the deputation get a direct response, but it's also very recent.
Councillor Blackburn?
I accept that, but the point is that this committee needs to know what we're doing about the support staff. We've made no mention about supporting them. We have teachers and what have you, but not support staff. And I think it's important that we see that.
Any comments?
Yeah, so thanks for the question, Councillor Blackburn. So the issue that was raised by support staff effectively was raised after the report came to the Scrutiny Board, which is why it wasn't referenced in the lessons learned. We have received communications from the staff subsequent to that and are engaging with staff around that. We have offered a further meeting with the trade union representatives of the support staff because that's the request that has come back into us. Councillor Hayden has also met with support staff at the school directly, and we will be responding to those as you'd expect. The only other point I would make, and I don't want to repeat the point I made at last committee meeting, but the school governing body are the employers of the school staff. The council is not, and there's an important distinction that we do have to make there in relation to the employer-employee relationship.
Councillor Heselwood.
Yeah, I can confirm that the trade unions are meeting. I know that is underway. And absolutely, the council are not the employers here. It is the school governing body, so we're not liable as a council because we don't employ those members of staff. So it's quite a, you know, it's not as straightforward as is being made out here.
Make a point of this in the minutes today, Councillor Blackburn. Okay, thanks. That was page 11. Page 12 and 13 of the minutes also deal with the Queensway. Oh, apologies.
That's okay, Chair. Page 11, paragraph 10. I think there's a typo there. If it could be corrected.
Thanks very much indeed. It shall be taken care of immediately. Thank you. Pages 12 and 13 are also dealing with Queensway School. Any queries on page 14, the minutes? 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Okay, so no other matters arising from the minutes. Thank you very much indeed. Could we have a proposal to accept the minutes as a true record, subject to the items you've just raised? Councillor Renshaw. Seconder. Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item number 7, which is school organisation and area-based planning. Is Rebecca going to lead on this particular one?
Yes, if I'll
open. Of course.
Yeah, thank you, and then I'll hand over to Rebecca. So this is related to the item we were just talking about in minutes there. It's school organisation and area-based planning. So this report sets out a new planning approach which was considered at Executive Board last week. It outlines a revised methodology for responding to both rising demand and surplus capacity in school places across the city, and emphasises the importance of undertaking robust and inclusive equality and impact assessment at the earliest stage of proposal development. Airborough and Rothwell have been identified as pilot areas for the new approach, which builds on members' comments around the Queensway Primary School Lessons Learned paper, which came to board last month. To ensure transparency and confidence in our approach, this process will include an extended period of consultation and analysis, making it as inclusive as possible, allowing input from all stakeholders, from staff and parent governors. And when I mean staff, I mean all the different types of staff that work in the school, so sports staff, which includes TAs, but not exclusively, and teaching staff, as well as parent governors and other governors, head teachers, and then an equally important ward councillors in the very earliest stage. I will retain oversight of the process as exec member, and it will be important, of course, for Scrutiny to be involved in this work once consultation information has been gathered from the local area, and to address concerns where objections are received. So I'll hand over to Rebecca. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Rebecca?
Oh, sorry, Dan.
It's okay, apologies. I wanted to say a couple of words really about the process and why it's advantageous very, very quickly. I think the paper sets out the fact that the duty around sufficiency is that of the local authority, and you'll all be aware of the national challenge around reducing birth rates and increasing surplus of places, which obviously will have a result in increasingly inefficient schools, which then, if we don't do something, has a consequent impact on educational quality, because we're making compromises in order to manage within budget. So there's a really significant imperative around children's outcomes for this. The reason why this approach is novel and positive is because it seeks to take that challenge in an area base from a strategic perspective, and also seeks to address the challenge around our equal and opposite challenge, one might say, around increasing demand on special needs places. Otherwise, what we're doing is making a series of separate decisions which aren't coherent and aren't linked. So this approach gives us the opportunity to take a strategic helicopter view of an area and hopefully make some of the challenges that we've got the answers to our other challenges. So I just wanted to flag that, and apologies, Rebecca, who has written the paper.
Thanks very much indeed, Dan. Rebecca, at last, over to you.
Okay. Just really briefly to add, I think some of the concerns that we recognise around this process is that it creates uncertainty and instability in an area. And we have to acknowledge that school organisation changes will always do that. And what we acknowledge and what we've got to work with as the team of officers working on this piece of work is to really work with the people that are part and are involved in that. That's really difficult because not at all times people aren't going to agree or think that the proposals put forward are the thing that they would choose. What we need to be clear about is the need for changes in an area, and really open and honest about those with everybody that's involved, so that they understand the reason behind any proposals that come forward. There's in the Executive Board report that's appended to the Scrutiny report, there is detail on the timeline and the proposed changes around what that process looks like. What we're also really clear about is that there is it's a long process. So that period of instability, that concern that people feel, we acknowledge will be for 45 weeks at least in any process. So we want to be open about that, because the concern often is that there will be a really quick decision. But this is a long process. It's something that we want to go through with people, and acknowledging that people will feel, to some extent, some uncertainty during that time, and we have to acknowledge that and not ignore it.
Thanks very much indeed, Rebecca. Does anybody else want to comment on the on this report? Officer Wise, no. Any questions or comments from members? Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at some of the, looking at the plan the primary planning area boundaries, there seems to be one or two little oddities. There's some islands totally surrounded by the red lining but not named. There's one between Bramholt Pool area and Alwoodley area, and then one down in the southeast between Epos Villages South and Lower Air Valley. And there also seems to be some strange elements around some of the actual boundaries themselves. But hopefully ward members will pick some of those up in their consultation.
These are based on the school places allocation boundaries. So this is what the school placement teams use. So it includes there's a kind of families of schools that are in an area that when we're allocating school placings. So those anomalies are probably linked to catchment areas being a bit of a funnier shape than, say, ward boundaries or, you know, other type of boundaries. But these are used year in, year out for our school placement teams. I don't know whether anybody else... Yeah.
I was just going to... So these, I think some of the islands that you can see are about the scale of the map that's available here. So everywhere within the city is covered by a primary place planning area. And as Councillor Hayden says, these are areas that have been based on the groupings of schools and how the nearest catchment areas that are offered around the admissions policies and how those fall. So some of those boundaries that look confusing are the way that we've grouped those schools and the people who attend those schools for years and years in terms of how we plan those school places. And it's about how pupils move, how they travel, how they generally preference their school places. That's the areas that have been grouped together there.
That okay, Councillor Bagari? Okay. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, and thank you for the reports as well. I think there are some positive proposals in here. So I think I particularly highlight the availability of accessible and clear materials for people to be able to read and access. I think acknowledging the role of community committees and acknowledging that local expertise is also very useful, and considering the availability of alternative provision, especially in outer areas where the distances may be bigger, where there may be fewer options, where transport connections may be more challenging. So I think all of those are positive points. I wanted to ask about the section on page 29, engagement with the community, and not only thinking about my community or the areas that are being piloted, but thinking more generally. Rebecca, you rightly acknowledged that these are highly emotive issues and that there often is uncertainty and instability whenever there are proposals, and very often residents feel that consultation is merely a box ticking exercise. That's very often the perception, when actually if consultation is done well, it can be a very constructive process. So I think what I'd like to understand more from this is thinking about the current approach, including the one taken at Queensway, and thinking about what is proposed moving forwards. How would this look different from a parental perspective? So for anybody who's watching this from my community, as I suspect there will be a few, how would this look different when any consultation is being brought forwards?
As Dan said earlier on, this is an innovative way of doing it. I don't know whether it's... I mean, I suspect it used to happen decades ago. We are in a situation where actually we can't tell schools to do what our area-based plan may come up with. But that's not really an answer to your question, but and that will only add to the uncertainty, to be honest, because we could come up with the best plan on paper and everybody's fed into it and it pleases a lot of people. You'll never please all the people all the time. But they will get that answered to, but then we can't unless schools, you know, comply and do what we the area-based plan wants, then we have a problem then, because of the way the school system is set up with academies and multi-academy trusts and free schools and LA schools, and yeah, it's a fragmented system that we don't have all the levers and all the control, but we have all the responsibility for sufficiency. I think what will look very different this time is that it will not be one school. It will be all the schools in that area. They will all get letters in asking them to take part in the consultation. Views will be, fed in from including all the different schools and and the different elements within the school community. So hopefully it will take away this perception that one school is being separated for something happened to it, and everybody else is kind of hiding away, going, "Oh, I'm glad it's not me that they're coming for," because it was never that approach before. It was just situations that arose. So hopefully everybody involved in an area and working together, it will feel very differently to how it has done previously. I don't know whether you
Councillor Edwards.
I think from a parent's perspective, one of the things that we've reflected on the previous process was that the pre-publication consultation that we're required to do by statutory guidance felt like the formal consultation. So the way that went out with one proposal for people to feed back and give their views on, that outcome then came to Executive Board. Executive Board made a formal decision about whether it proceeded to the next process. The sense from the lessons learned is that fed into parental perception that was then a decision that had been taken and it was happening regardless of what happened next. Whereas actually the statutory notice period, so the phase 2 consultation, is the formal consultation. The Executive Board then make a decision on the outcome. So the previous process actually, I think, heightened that sense of it was a fait accompli. It was a decision that had been taken because Executive Board made a decision to proceed to the next step. The approach that we'll be taking going forward is that when that pre-publication consultation goes out, we'll be very clear about how we've reached that decision. So why are we proposing this thing? Why is it that this is seen to be the appropriate thing to consult on, whether that's school changes or school closure, and all the things that have been considered. Whereas in our previous approach, what we've reflected on and realised is that from the public's perception, we were going out with one thing and one thing only, without really an explanation of how we'd got to that point. So the new process starts us from an earlier point, brings people into that conversation sooner.
Dan.
I just think as well, Councillor Edwards, in relation to your question about how will this feel for parents and how will it be different, I think it's really important to be quite clear that what we can't promise as part of this process is that everybody's going to be happy with the eventual proposal and any decisions that are arrived at. I mentioned in my preamble that we have a national challenge, which is replicated in Leeds, around low birth rates and increasing surplus of mainstream places. So someone has to grasp the nettle and make decisions which, even if we go through an interminable amount of consultation and engagement, which is genuine, but it isn't a referendum, and ultimately a decision will be taken which is the right thing based on the knowledge available, and it won't please everybody. I suppose taking the approach around SEND means that there might be a sense that on the one, we may, I suppose, to a degree, be taking away with one hand but giving with another in terms of an area and the eventual provision that remains there.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you for those responses, and that it's helpful to understand that. And I welcome the area-based approach, because I don't think this can be about one school. And I also acknowledge what you're saying about the mosaic of different school types that we have, which makes things more complicated from a planning point of view. in terms of individual schools and their responses to any consultation exercise, how widely available will their responses be? And will they be publicly available? Will they be available to counsellors? Will they be available to other schools? Just so that we have an idea from a factual point of view.
So as part of the, I mean, in any of these processes, what we will absolutely do when it comes to making a decision is publish a summary of the content of all of the engagement and consultation that we've done. I don't know if that answers your question, but you mean it?
Will it name individual schools and their responses, or would it be a general summary from all of the schools in the area?
I think we'd need to take advice, if I'm honest. I'm not sure. So the decision to proceed to the statutory consultation process will be a published decision. So there'll be a report that accompanies that. And I'd need to take advice on whether actually it would be explicit about individual schools' responses in the same way that we wouldn't name individual governors or staff members or parents who respond. But I'll take advice, if that's all right.
Could you come back to us?
Yeah,
about
yeah.
Councillor Downs.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of points. One, I'm in support of moving forward with this new proposal because I think it will give the opportunity for a community to have the say. A couple of points, so one is that I'm looking at the primary school place planning update, which has been released just under 2 weeks ago, where it's showing that in the Airborough area, the projected area totals of children starting reception is actually potentially going to increase in 2028 to levels slightly above those in 2024. Now, I accept that's just 1 year, but it does show that there's a potential that the problems may potentially be going away. And I just wonder how that will feed into the consultation that will be going through in Airborough. That's point one. The other issue is, the reason why I support it is because, and I fully understand the problem that the council doesn't have full control over all the schools within the area, and I regret that. I don't like the way that things are set up, but we have to accept that we are where we are. But at least if everywhere is consulted, the council can come back with a balanced opinion as to what should be done. If it can't be done, then it's not the council's fault, and the council can't take blame for what schools may say, well, it's not our problem, we're not going to get involved in the solution. But it does at least give everybody in the round the opportunity to look at it and say, we see there's a problem, let's work collectively towards a solution. And that is what I would hope that schools would do to address the fact that this would appear that there's a short-term problem. Let's work together as a community and work out the solution. Thank you.
Councillor Hayden.
I've consulted Emeritus Professor from Leeds University. This is not a short-term problem. This will continue to fall. In 2024, there was quite a big surplus of places in reception in the Airborough area. So, and this year, so if 2028 is slightly above 2024, then there's still going to be a really quite sizable surplus of places. I haven't got the figures off the top of my head, but I do know in 2025, September 2025, in the Airborough area, there are 71 surplus places in reception. So this is not a short-term problem. I've been doing rather, because I am a geek, I've been doing rather a lot of research in this, including consulting professors who are experts in the field and have been for 50 years. And in 2022, the birth rate in this country was 1.57 per female, of childbearing per female, and 2023 it was 1.44. That's a 1.3% drop in a year. So it's and if that continues to drop in that way, globally we're seeing Italy's at 1.22, South Korea is below 1. So we are seeing globally we're seeing this problem everywhere. We have to, but we also So before, because Rebecca and others, potentially Rebecca, did raise it that we might, in 5 years' time, the birth rate goes up again, and then so in 10 years' time, we're having to open more places. From the research I've done and from the advice I've been given, this is not a short-term problem. This is one that is going to be with us for a long time.
Come back briefly on that point, I'll accept what you've said. The only thing I would say is that also within the wards that I represent, in the areas that I represent, we are potentially going to be getting more housing, which by the time this blip goes, there's a potential that the actual population may shift a little bit more into our area. These are things that will be taken account of in the area-based, and I'm just highlighting it. I'm not asking for an answer today. I'm just saying these things will potentially have an effect.
And when I spent 3 years as exec member for infrastructure, I'm very aware of the proposed housing in Otley. So Otley will have a very different plan to Airborough. And that's why it's really good to do this area-based approach, because different parts of the city are very different to each other, even when they're next door and within one ward. So that's why it's really important to take a school place, an area-based approach based on how we allocate school places, based on catchment areas, and it will, each area plan, and that's why we're starting with Airborough and Rothwell, because we know now, because we can see 5 years in advance, we know that they're the two areas that are facing the most, whereas where I am, it's 5,000 in the east with 5,000 houses being built as we speak. It's less acute than we're seeing in certain areas such as Airborough.
Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. It's probably worth saying, I think Councillor Hayden said that the council don't have the power to force schools to take action. I think the staff, governors and pupils at Queensway will probably dispute that, given the council were forcing a closure upon them. I just want to check in terms of the process. So, because I think I mentioned this last time, there were minutes from the Community Committee of the Outer North West last time the council attempted to shut Queensway, where a community committee area planning meeting was convened to discuss school place pressures. And I mentioned last time, follow the minutes, following that next election, that they never reconvened. So if this was already trialled in the community committee area, bringing all schools together, but we still ended up with a proposed forced closure on Queensway, how confident can we be that this model is going to work this time round?
There was no forced closure. There was nothing forced. And it wasn't a decision to close. There was never a decision to close Queensway. That meeting that was referred to as a community committee meeting that involves the schools, it was not... I wasn't there, but it was, from all accounts, not the most collegiate amongst the schools to sort a problem out. This is why we are taking a fresh approach. I absolutely cannot force any school to do anything. I wouldn't want to either. But we have a problem, and when you have a problem which you are responsible for, you need to, but don't have the levers to actually sort the problem out, then we need to tackle many parts. That meeting did not involve the views of parents, different staff members. It was the head teachers, chairs of governors, as I could be wrong there, but it wasn't a meeting. It wasn't a meeting that involved and consulted lots of people, different people's ideas. It was led by the community committee, not by children and families.
Any comeback, Councillor Stevenson?
I just think we need to be clear that this council has rescinded a statutory consultation to close a school. That was a decision the council were making. I wouldn't want anybody watching to think Councillor Hayden's just said about an attempt to close a school was not accurate, because the papers speak for themselves. In terms of this process, the model moving forward, I have some observations about on the proposed process and timeline on page 38, just around sort of, I suppose, the role of scrutiny, but also ward members as well. It feels like scrutiny is brought into this too far down the line, and it sometimes feels so the calling process, for example, is scrutiny flexing its muscles, or ward members flexing their muscles to react to something that's happening. And there is a very positive role of scrutiny, be it through working groups in private or otherwise, which is take a steer and soundings and a critical friends view as such much earlier. And so for me, the point at which there is, I think week one is the identification of demand and surplus concern. There's something missing there in where's the role of scrutiny in actually making sure that your methodology is convincing and accurate. And I say that, I suppose, in the context of it will change from area to area. The surplus demand will change once it depends on if you've got inner city, more transient populations, that surplus need will change over time to outer areas, etc. But also there's an impact on, if we're asking schools to have surplus places between 5 and 10%, say, that results in a financial pressure on those schools because that's places that they're not filling to staff. So I do think there needs to be, even if it is in a private working group or something, a role for scrutiny and ward members at that very early stage to make sure we're confident that the methodology is correct and we're convinced by it. So I think that's just a comment really in terms of where scrutiny fits into the process. And then in terms of the local plan stuff that Councillor Downs mentioned a minute ago, there is a concern, I think, in that how do we actually capture the plan for new homes in an area and school provision when you're in a changing process. So I think it's accepted that it's silly to have schools across the city that are half full and at the same time build new schools. But in reality, if the schools that are only half full are not in the immediate community, that community needs and requires a new school for those new homes that are being built, or to relieve pressure on the school that's existing there. And I don't think, from what I've seen in the report here, we properly understand or capture how do we deal with what's coming in the local plan. Because if you speak to the DFE, they'll say, well, if it's not subject to a live planning application, they're not accepting the numbers. And then you'll push back and say, well, actually, these numbers, it's subject to a live planning application. Then they start saying, well, the build-out rates aren't as anticipated, and they keep pulling the funding. And it's an other pressure, a known unknown that's in the system, but I don't see an area, even if it's the people on the board, all the officers, you know, where's the officer from planning that's in that area that can advise on it? Thank you, Chair.
Two separate issues there, one on the role of scrutiny and the role on new developments, sort of planning, the local plan, etc. Who'd like to take the first one on scrutiny?
I'll take that one. And I want to say, for the record, we rescinded a notice to go to consultation. We rescinded a notice for consultation, to go to consultation. There was not a notice to closure. You can laugh all you want, that's the fact. It was a statutory notice to go to consultation.
Councillor Stevenson,
and the proposal was within the consultation.
Could you just allow Councillor Hayden to finish what she was saying?
Thank you. In terms of scrutiny, we're bringing it to scrutiny now. So the methodology is in front of scrutiny now. So and we want to bring it to scrutiny to get your input. So you are involved at the earliest stage. How feasible it would be for scrutiny to be involved in individual area plans, then that's debatable. Ward members will be who are, but scrutiny board is for the whole of Leeds, but ward members for that area will be involved in the area planning. If there is, so then those draft plans, once they've been, will come back to scrutiny to then for you, while they're still in draft, for the whole board to have a look at, see if we've done our methodology correctly before they then proceed forward. I think that's possibly the most feasible way of doing it. This is a scrutiny board for the whole of the city. So in getting involved, scrutiny getting involved with individual area plans, I don't think is feasible. But in terms of our methodology, that's what we're discussing today. And then when it's been gone through, elected members absolutely will be involved from day one. And then the draft plans come back here because this is a pilot and we want to get it right, so it will come back to scrutiny before it then is published. Phil, if you want to come in on the second one, but I am very, again, because of my exec member experience, I'm very cognizant of the need to involve planning and planning applications. And it is a live debate in the east of the city as to whether actually we do need a new school or not. DFE is saying at the moment we do. Head teachers are telling me in local schools that they're worried that a new school will destabilise them because they are seeing lower numbers. But then, so it is a live debate and one we'll be very conscious of when we get to that those areas of the city.
Phil. Chair, the comment I was going to make has been covered, so nothing for me to add.
If I may,
yeah,
Chair,
sorry, Phil, I didn't catch that.
I was just going to say the comment I was going to make, Chair, has been covered, so nothing for me to add.
Okay.
Just clarify a point.
Councillor Stevenson, yeah.
Before, I think officers understood what I was getting to, but just for clarity, on the plan, the proposed timelines, that when I refer to methodology, I'm talking about the board, the plan. It's the stage of identifying the surplus and demand figures in each area is where I was talking about. The methodology applied to that. I think you've got, and it's at that point where I do disagree in terms of the role of scrutiny. I think there is a role for scrutiny in that on an area because it's about a calculation, and ultimately it's about the application of a policy, and it's about a check, can be in private, but a check and a balance on whether the surplus demands that you're thinking of are accurate or not.
Phil, do you want to come in on that?
Just a general point, really, Chair. I think the executive member and all the officers would absolutely agree that we really welcome the input of scrutiny into every single process that we do. And, you know, if there are particular concerns that are raised, then we would seek to engage and address them. We've set out in the paper what we think is a very robust process. We've set out that that's a pilot approach to be undertaken. I think, you know, we will undertake that, and if there are lessons to be learned from that, we would seek to do that. But there's a danger that we almost lose track of the fact that we're going from one process to a new process. We're building in significant improvements into that process. We're building in additional capacity to make that process work, and we're suggesting that we pilot that process to see if there's any learning that flows from that. I wonder whether we might want to do that and then regroup and see where we are at in terms of if there are any further adjustments that might need to be made to the process, rather than trying to do it here and now in a single meeting.
You wanted to add something, Haig?
Thank you, Chair. I just really wanted to add, and I think it's really important to give the clarity that this is a set of processes that it's not possible to do perfectly, and there will always be a challenge during the run-up to and after a decision around, did we know this about population growth or inward migration or birth rate or local plan? It is always the case that you make a decision and then a few years down the road, things that you couldn't have predicted start to happen. What we do know is that we have a large and growing surplus of places and not enough children to fill them. And so, notwithstanding the inbuilt imperfections within the way that the framework and the context within which we're working, doing something and moving to a model that seeks to see everything in and around, as far as I can see, is probably the best possible solution that we could find to a really difficult and intractable problem.
Thank you, Dan. Stevenson? Okay. Councillor Blackburn.
I understand what you're talking about the having the crystal ball about pupil numbers, having served in our administration to actually shut some schools down because we had surplus spaces, and then by the time we shut them down we were having to open extra classes because we had more children have been born. I can understand where you're coming from there. It's not an easy science to follow. But do you think by operating the system you're going to there, you'll be able to actually take people with more than we are at the moment, instead of it becoming a battle, a discussion? And the other thing is, it says inclusive consultation. Well, how inclusive? I raised under matters arising about the support staff, and we come back and support staff don't work for us. But are they going to be involved in the consultation, although they don't work for us?
Okay, I think Councillor Hayden talked about consultation sort of earlier on, but if you could just address the specific point that Councillor Blackburn raised there.
Parents don't work for us either. Everyone will be consulted. And it's not just support staff that don't work for us. Anybody working in a school is employed by the governing body. Most of us around this table are governors, so we know that. So we don't, yes, Leeds City Council might do the payroll if a school decides, or a multi-academy trust decides, or it's one of our local authority maintained schools. But as we know from being governors, we are as governors, you're an employer, not Leeds City Council. It's local management of schools. It changed in 1986. So it's in terms of inclusive consultation, yes, and as I said in my introduction, it will involve all the different types of staff within a school. It will also involve parents and ward councillors who are not employees either.
Councillor Blackburn, okay. All right. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Flint.
Oh, sorry, I forgot. Okay, I think it was just about the process. So I understand about the pilot places and why they've been chosen. Do you have an idea of how long that phase would last, and then what happens next? Do you choose the next tranche down, or would it be rolled out kind of citywide? Because I think there's a stat in there that there's only 78% of places in reception filled, which is pretty shocking, isn't it? And obviously we vary around the city, but it's clearly something that needs addressing in more areas. So are there the next priority areas? And then I was just thinking about my lovely niece, actually. I could tell you all about her. She's 4 years old and she's called Felicity and she's in a different city. But my brother and their family, they chose their school. But I think why the transparency of all this is really, really important is otherwise parents, the peer community of parents is there's a strong pressure, isn't there? And people talk to each other and make their decisions very much based on what their peers are doing. So there were 4 schools in the area, and it was very clear that one of them was going to close, but there was no kind of real notice given. So the parents decided themselves, between all their chats in the coffee shops, which school they were all going to choose. So I think the transparency at the earliest stage possible is really important. And also, how early are you going to kind of consult with parents, because it's kind of almost when the child is born that those conversations start happening amongst parents. So the consultation needs to happen really early. I think that's it.
I'll just come in. Yes, absolutely, and that's why we need to do this, because it is, and that kind of parent peer group is really, really powerful. And people start voting with their feet or deciding amongst themselves, which is why we wanted to take this area-based approach, so that no one school is singled out. Because there will be already schools in certain areas that have less pupils than others. And also the kind of, but we can see how many babies are being born, so we do have a 4 to 5 year window. Obviously less if they're summer born, but we do have that of seeing what's going to happen in the future in terms of, I mean, some people will move out of the city. I have no idea why, but but other people might move in. You're right. We've 101 out of 152 schools who are full in reception. So we have 51 schools who have places in reception, and it is across the city, but concentrated more in one areas. But on the intelligent and technical stuff, I'll bring in Rebecca.
Set me up to fail a little bit there. No, what I was going to add, in terms of the how often and looking at other areas, absolutely we've prioritised Guiseley, Eden Road and Rothwell to commence from September. But we receive annual updates on the birth figures. So our birth data is about babies that are born up until the end of August, because they'll join school in 4 years' time. So once we have those updated figures again, they've been shared through the planning sheets in the last couple of weeks. So there is a more recent update. But as we get each update, the team review across the whole city and look at, right, where would be our next priority. So in terms of kind of reviewing, reflecting on how this process works, actually this first stage that will take place in autumn will be the part that we really want to look at and see how did that work out, without waiting until we get to the end of any process that comes out of it. So we will do that at the end of autumn to look at how did the revised approach to bringing everyone together, having that consultation go, how did that feel, how did it look, to then think about, we need to come back here, we'll come back to executive board, to then say, right, which would be the next areas that we need to look at. But it's just an ongoing process that the team go through. I was going to mention earlier the reference to kind of housing projections and the build rates and all of those things isn't explicit in the report, but it is absolutely what the team work on all the time. So they're constantly reviewing birth data, projection data, house builds, popularity and how families preference the schools in the local area based on changes, and that's their bread and butter. That's what they're doing day in, day out when they're looking at projections and what the impact is. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. Thanks, Dan, you've just got it ahead of me there. I would be grateful if you don't just jump in if you're giving an answer to a question or a query. Could you just indicate to me that you want to speak, and I'll bring you in. I will bring you in. Dan.
Thank you, Chair. There were a couple of questions which I just wanted to answer. Firstly, and thank you to Councillor Blackburn for acknowledging the challenge that we have around the crystal ball. Will we take people with us? Up to a limit, yes, but I'll repeat my earlier point about the fact that these are going to be, at least for some people, unpopular decisions because we're rationalising an estate. However, I should add that once we have a number of school places which is more closely aligned with the number of children that are available, the government increasingly gives us basic need funding, so that if there are challenges around the need to grow our estate in future in response to fluctuating and growing numbers, we'll qualify for additional externally provided grant funding from the government in terms of that capital. We won't if we don't do anything. So I think that it's important to acknowledge that there's a relationship here between what we do and future capital funding that might come in. And I really wanted to make this point as well in terms of the question about the inclusive consultation. We definitely consult with support staff, and I personally, alongside various officers, both here and not in the room, sat in very challenging, very uncomfortable but very important consultation discussions face to face with staff members, teachers and support staff, parents and children and young people, in order to provide them with the opportunity to have difficult but very clear, open and honest conversations with us. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that even previously, and certainly into the future, we would always make sure that we were there in person, wherever possible, to talk to everybody. The only other thing I wanted to say, and apologies, I'll crave your indulgence just to answer a further sort of implied question from Councillor Flint, which was around when would you start the process? The answer is there's never a good time, because people are, once you're in school, you're in school, so you could start at the beginning or the end of the school year. It's always, the length of the process is always going to have implications, because it's going to involve change for some people, and nobody wants to change their school place once it's started. So the fact that we're being open and transparent about the length of time and the stages within it will probably bring some comfort, but ultimately doing this process and this job isn't going to be easy or fun for anybody, but it's about trying to minimise the negative impact by being clear from the outset. Thanks.
Thanks very much indeed, Dan. I think we've probably covered consultation from top to bottom on that one. So if we could move on now to Councillor Heselwood.
Yes, thank you. Where the Outer North West Community Committee has been referred to, can we minute it as the old Outer North West Community Committee, please? Because since the new municipal year has started, there is a new Outer North West Community Committee, which now includes myself and Councillor Flint as Wheatwood members. But we were not included. We were not obviously in the old style Outer North West Community Committee, and we're not at that meeting, and we're not not involved in those discussions at all. So I would just like it minuting that it was the old Outer North West Community Committee that held that meeting and discussion. Thank you.
Noted, and it will be minuted. Thank you. Kate.
Thank you. Sorry, it may be that this has already been covered, but I just wanted to clarify something. But I just wanted to say, first of all, that I very much welcome the proposals, because I think this is really positive, and you've obviously looked at the lessons learned from Queensway. And
Could you bring your mic closer to you, Kate?
Sorry, and obviously considered some of the discussions at the Scrutiny Board previously, but it was just around process, actually, and I think touching upon what had already been raised. I just wanted to clarify the role of Scrutiny Board. Sorry to go over it again, but just because I've noticed that you've referenced in the report a decision that we made back in 2019, which I recall that decision at the time being kind of quite a controversial one around the role of the School Organisation Advisory Board, when the decision was made that that would be dissolved, and the kind of role that Scrutiny Board would take in place of that. And it was just to understand a bit better how that fits in then with what you're proposing, because the old School Organisation Advisory Board's role only kicked in once the statutory notice had been made. So that's right, isn't it? So our role then kicked in at that point. So when you've been looking at this sort of revised process, am I right in thinking then that, again, our role as it was then under what is still the current arrangement but will be replaced, is that going to be the same, or have you considered sort of how that fits in with the new sort of revised proposals, or whether, because I was just looking as well at the membership of the board, the planning board, and obviously it sets out on page 41, I think it is, membership, but and there's obviously some discretion around then who would be invited to attend based on agenda items, but it very much seems that it's like it would be officer led, and obviously that I assume that's happened earlier on before we get to the point where we might be involved. So I know others have already sort of touched upon this, but is there any scope for our involvement at an earlier point? How does that old arrangement fit with what you're proposing? Does that make sense? Sorry, I've not asked it very clearly, but I think you know what I mean.
Rebecca.
So yes, it is the same. So it's the part after the statutory notice period. If there are objections at that point, that's when it would come to scrutiny. I think, as Phil said, we'd be keen to explore it this way and then reflect and come back if we need to, if we feel like there needed to be an additional layer. The consideration we've given to it is around the timescales, to be honest, and the perception from public and staff members and others that if, you know, this is a very formal meeting, the webcast, you know, it's out there and people feel that where decisions are taken, that then it is a decision. And whilst we may know the intricacies of this is a decision to proceed to a consultation, it feels like a decision to close a school. And so actually we're trying to keep a balance on how that feels. You know, because we can argue, we can say, but it's not a formal decision. We've not formally decided to close a school. We've decided to formally consult. That isn't the experience or the feeling of members of the public and staff members, understandably. So, which is why we've opted to keep in the scrutiny board role after the statutory notice. If there are objections to the proposal, that's where that comes in.
Yeah, okay, thank you. No, that does make sense. I suppose what I would say then is, and I think others have said this, I suppose when you're holding those board meetings, I would just ask that you do exercise that discretion really carefully when you're thinking about who else you would be inviting for those individual board meetings, obviously depending on the agenda, to ensure that some of what's been raised today in terms of ensuring that all the relevant stakeholders and voices have been heard. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Kate. I think there's no doubt this item will come back to the scrutiny board at some sort of stage. I think the point that Phil made earlier on was well made. We've got a pilot already started or about to start or whatever, and it would make sense, I think, to look at the results of those pilots a bit later in the year, autumn, perhaps running into winter. Would you be happy with that, Phil?
I will look at my erstwhile colleagues who will do the work, Chair, but yes.
Dan?
I think just in terms of nailing down a date now, it might be helpful for us to go away and find out when the best time would be to come back when we know that we've got enough evidence under our belt to be able to provide a meaningful response. Would that be okay?
Fine. Given the issues we've had with the post-16 SEND transport issue, which has changed about 3 or 4 times already, fully understand that, but it will come back, no sort of two ways about it. Last speaker is Councillor Jenkins.
Yeah, it's hard to add anything useful. I suppose it's a very complex subject, and I think you need a holistic crystal ball to be helpful. So I just wondered whether it talks about an area-based planning board, but there's nobody from planning actually there. But probably, hopefully, you'll have within your department people who can envisage what the needs are of children in the city. But would that include alternative provision as well, the role of the academies, and how everybody works together, really? I think that's probably quite an important thing. That at a local level, I think we, as most of us are governors, recognise that the difficulties that schools face. I mean, we're lucky in East Leeds. We've got an East Leeds partnership of 6 primary schools that work together, and that doesn't happen everywhere, I don't think. So that's just my comment, really.
Just a comment, Councillor Jenkins, yeah? Councillor Jenkins, just a comment, yeah?
Well, I don't mind.
Councillor Hayden.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, it goes back to what we were saying before, that we are going to be dependent on, and it will include all schools, no matter what their legal status is. It will include all people, children, young people, their families, and all the staff working in those schools. So that can feed into the consultation. We are relying on the schools then working together. My hope would be that they would recognise that, and I know because I have conversations with many of them, that they are very acutely aware of the situation, and And I mean, yeah, I take the crystal ball point, but we know how many babies are being born. We know how many, we know how many children are living in an area. So we always would have a 5%, 10% you would want in terms of flex within in any situation. So, but I do, although this approach is innovative, as Rebecca said earlier, we have a small team, but a brilliant team of experts working on whose bread and butter is looking at school places, where's popular, where's not, where the demographic changes, house building, all that sort of thing. They're doing it now. They've been doing it for years. So I'm not at all worried that those officers will, and this team beside me won't get it in right in terms of, the numbers and the data and the projections, etc. Obviously, projections will never be 100% correct, but they are experts in this work.
Briefly, Dan.
Very briefly, apologies. I wanted to just add, I suppose, an observation in response to a comment in relation to, we quite often, and I think mistakenly, sometimes talk about schools, local authority maintained schools and academies as being very, very different. And of course, from a political and a governance perspective and decision-making perspective within the law, of course they are. But they are all schools, and they're all schools in our city. And we have extremely positive, long-lived working relationships with leaders and workers within those within academy schools. And so I don't see it as being a barrier, although it's a challenge because we don't have the power, but we still retain a great deal of influence as part of our partnership working. And I dare say that most of the academies in the city also have local authority councillors as part of their governing body, and so there's an extension to the influence there as well. And I'll shut up now.
Thanks, Dan. I've just one final sort of point, which I don't want an answer to today, but I would appreciate officers, Rebecca, with your small and very talented team, coming back to me in sort of due course. The size of the new board is 14, seems fairly large, but I'm not really too concerned about that. But the quorum is a very small number of 3. And given the difficulties that we had over the consultation over Queensway and the legal or alleged lack of legal advice, etc., etc., I'd just like you to consider whether 3 is sufficient, and if you do think that it is, whether a legal officer should be one of those 3, and whoever's leading or chairing that particular group should be at least deputy or chief officer level or above. No need to come back to me now, but I'd like an answer to that in due course. Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next item, which is the item we're moving up the agenda, SACRA. Oh, I do apologise, Ryan. Very briefly, please.
On the recommendations, because I think we haven't formally yet. I think there's been a bit of disagreement, but the one thing I think we all agreed on was the need for the input from somebody from city development in terms of planning. So can we move a formal recommendation from this board that we recommend that somebody from city development joins the board in terms of housing and planning?
Anyone second that? Carried, I think. Carried. Okay, Ryan. Do you want to do comments on that? Yeah, the recommendations, yeah. Oh, my apologies, missed the recommendations. Please come and join us. The recommendations for this item then are first to note and comment the new area-based planning approach to school organisational change across Leeds, and to make any recommendations considered to be appropriate in relation to the new approach, and identify any areas for future scrutiny activity arising from the report. And Rob is desperately trying to get a formal words together to add the other recommendation to it.
Yeah. There's now a recommendation C, and through you, Chair, that a representative from City Development, I think planning, Council says that the planning department is a part of the area-based planning board. And that was moved by Councillor Stevens, seconded by Councillor Blackburn.
Can we then have a move on the other two recommendations? Have someone to Councillor Stevenson, second Councillor Blackburn. Second. All in favour? Any against? No. Okay. Thanks very much. I do apologise to the next speakers. Could you perhaps introduce yourselves and do speak fairly closely to the mic if you wouldn't mind. I think Rob's going to come down with your cards now, so we'll be able to hear you. Say again. This has been moved forward now. Sacra, yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Russell Trudgeon. I am the chair of SACRA.
Hi, everyone. I'm Council Officer. I'm Head of School Improvement, Katie North.
And who's going to take this item forward?
I think I've been asked by Katie. Thank you very much for allowing us to come to this scrutiny committee this afternoon. We have obviously issued our report, and it was for 23-24. Things have happened since then, and we've had another year of committee meetings as a SACRA. And we have, as you may know, hopefully, that there are 4 different attending groups which we have to have to make good our decision making for the schools in promoting religious education and supporting schools around the city to provide the agreed local syllabus and support them in their collective worship. I'm very pleased to say I've seen 2 local councillors here this afternoon. Unfortunately, Councillor Downs has had to leave, but he has been a regular attender for SACRA, and obviously Councillor Edwards has also been in attendance, which has been much appreciated. Thank you for that time. One issue which has come to our attention, however, is that we do have a continual need to have in attendance councillors, apart from those I've already mentioned, who have been good at attending. We do have named party councillors who don't come regularly, or I haven't seen for over a year. So I'm really minded that perhaps there is something we can do, if there's a lever to pull or whatever, to say this is an important part of the education process for the children and the schools and the pupils that we represent of school age, or all 119,000 plus. And we want to give them the very best support, or certainly the teachers, we want to give them the best support in RE. And so we would like to kind of like raise a question, if we may, Chair, as to whether the actual attendance could be, I don't know whether there's a whip or a lever or what it is that needs to be done, that actually makes a regular visits from councillors to our SACRA meetings. So that's the sort of question I'd like to raise. The other good things, however, that I want to just raise this afternoon is that we have been able to initiate as a SACRA around the city a faith trail for teachers, which was a pilot idea that we wanted to do and has been done in different places around in the past, but we wanted to reignite that. And so we arranged a coach, and we took teachers who were able to come, about 35, around the city to 5 different places of worship in a school day. And that was a really good opportunity for the faith centres to connect with schools and to explain a little bit more openly about their faiths and the way that they worship in the different faith locations around the city. And we did this because there was a tiny pot of money that we were able to collect because of the royalties that we had accrued on the Pennine Learning approved syllabus. So the samples of work or examples of work which are provided in the documents and support from the syllabus means that we could actually hire a bus and get the teachers to these different places. Now, I know last time I came I was probably asking for money and it was like tumbleweed down the side. But what I wanted to just say is that, you know, SACRA does rely on other bodies of volunteers, which they come because they love it, and they come because they know that they've got a voice to be heard, and they've got something to encourage and support all the multicultural, diverse society that we have here in Leeds. And so we know that the more active we are, the greater the benefit. And we have seen, and I think Katie will be able to tell us the figures, some increase in the outcomes for RE as an exam success. So my mind is that RE is a really great subject. It does have influence on so many other subjects within the school curriculum. So it's a way of saying we want to do our job and we want to do it well, and we want to build on what we have started by inviting other pupils from schools to attend these faith centres, perhaps not 5 but 3 or 4, so that they can experience for themselves as ambassadors for their school, and then return and disseminate their knowledge and learning and experience to the class. So again, it just brings RE alive in the classroom. So that's our ambition. That's what we've been doing, and we would like to see more support from councillors in the sense of attending meetings, and we'd also like to see if there were any funds available to be allocated for it, for this outreach to schools. And we'd also like to just thank everyone that's been involved as well to date.
Thank you, Russell. Katie, would you like to add anything to that?
Thank you. I can just add to some information around the positive GCSE outcomes, if that's helpful, because there wasn't a lot of information in the report about that, because that information wasn't available at the time of the report. So I suppose just to make everybody aware that the results in Leeds at GCSE level are really positive for RE. They're positive when compared to national, and they're also positive when compared to previous years. So just to give you one example of a figure, the Progress 8 figure sits at plus 0.42. Obviously national would be 0, that would be sort of average. So some positive impact and outcomes at that level.
Thanks very much indeed, Katie. In terms of attendance, Russell, which you raised very early on there, Councillor Hayden, of course, is a member of SACRA. I'm sure she'll be attending all future meetings. And we have
I haven't managed to get to one. I am guilt-ridden as a Catholic myself and a former RE teacher. The guilt is palpable from me sitting here. I profusely apologise. Every single SACRA meeting clashed with something that I had to be at. So, not that I shouldn't have had to be. You see, my guilt is just like, pouring out. It's immensely important to me. I attended SACRA meetings as an RE teacher back in the day, and incredibly, and the agreed curriculum was my bread and butter. That's what, as well as, and there was a fantastic faith hub, whatever we used to call it, in Faith Centre in Bradford, that when I was working at Bingley Grammar, that we utilised an awful lot. And yes, I will be attending every single meeting going forward, and my chief whip is sitting to my right. I will bring Councillor Flint in on whether it can be whipped. I'm hoping not, given my past year's attendance, but I will be there.
Well, my second one was going to be, thanks very much, Councillor Hayden. It wasn't meant to embarrass you, but clearly it did. Which we're all glad to see. We also have 2 chief whips here today.
There's only one chief whip.
Yeah. All right. Okay, you wanted to come in, Councillor Flint.
I do, thank you. I'm Emma Flint, I'm the chief whip, so you can email me with the members and I'll pass that on to the group whips if they're not all mine. But no problem at all. It's you can't be whipped to go, Councillor Hayden.
And I'm sure Councillor Stevenson would echo that.
Yeah, I was just going to add a question around for all members regarding councillors that hybrid meetings are the way forward for everybody these days, and whether that would be a route to make sure people could get there if that's not already the case.
Hybrid meetings do have a place. However, there's nothing like seeing people in the face, an eye to eye. And we do actually go from not just a meeting room like this, where there's all the services for hybrid communication. We are going out to schools and various places of worship. Again, it just brings it alive and makes it more relevant. It also gives us a cup of tea together and we get to talk. And I think that actually is as important as the business of SACRA, because when you know someone of a different faith and you know a little bit more about them as a person, I think you begin to recognise your differences and probably similarities. So we do want to foster that, and I realise that in a time-pressured world, yes, hybrid meetings are good, but I don't know that we would be able to offer it on every meeting. As chair, I think I've made the right decision because I know that I feel that there is a greater commonality and sort of cohesion between members by having it in person. But I would also say that perhaps we might be able to do at least one meeting a year where it is available on hybridisation. So we will certainly look at that. We do have our annual AGM type meeting, which is in September, so perhaps we could do that one as a hybrid.
Thank you, Russell. You can see all the lumps in my head, actually, from banging against a brick wall as regards personal attendance at meetings, etc. I think we've lost that one. But in addition to that, Rob's just reminded me the General Purposes Committee actually appoint members to this, to your committee, so it can be taken back there and perhaps looked at the people who have actually been appointed to it, make sure that if the people who do or have been appointed to it do attend, or if they don't, we can perhaps replace them with others. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you very much, and I'd just like to put on record my appreciation, and I think all of our appreciation for the work that that everyone who volunteers on SACRA does. I take the point about hybrid meetings for some of the meetings, but I do also think you make a very valid point about how useful it is for different people to be able to meet in person and to network. And I've always found the meetings to be very constructive, very helpful, very positive as well. So I would encourage any members who have an interest in SACRA to follow it up. And I'd also like to acknowledge what you were saying about the faith trail for teachers. I know that you were very resourceful in following up that funding, and I think it's a hugely positive thing to be involving different teachers, different schools and faith communities together, particularly at a time when school budgets are pressed and challenged, but also in terms of connecting up faith communities and organisations within the community with local schools. So thank you for all of your work in bringing that forward, and I very much hope that this is something that can be continued in the future, and that those positive relationships can be developed.
Very, very briefly, Councillor Hayden.
Very briefly, huge thanks to Councillor Edwards for his commitment to SACRE and as faith champion, and the amount of work he's doing. So I just want to say a huge thank you. Also acknowledge the GCSE results. That's huge. Step forward, and I can absolutely testify how beneficial studying RE is, but not only to other subjects or to personal development, but in a world where we're getting more and more polarised, understanding each other, seeing other people's point of views and listening to other people and developing those skills of debate and listening, I think is enormously important for us all, but particularly for our young people coming up. Thank you. And thank you to everything you do.
We can definitely see you at the next SACRE meeting then, Councillor Hayden. Okay, moving on to the next item, which is financial... Oh, I do apologise.
It's just a comment, actually. I went to a Catholic school, St Michael's, and Councillor Hayden and I spoke about it, have many conversations about it. And who would have thought in today's meeting I'm sat next to my old RE and history teacher, Mr. Britton. So I went, are you Mr. Britton? But there we go. I just wanted to say that. But anyway, there we go.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Just before we move on to the next item, the recommendation on this SACRE Annual Report 23-24 is that members are asked to note the content and recommendations set out within the appended report. Would someone like to move that? Councillor Edwards, seconded. Councillor Mayor France. All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Unanimous. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to the next item, which is financial health monitoring for 25-26. I am conscious that this is just very early on in the year, and I would like to divide it into two, really. The first aspect is the actual financial sort of part of this. There's been a projected overspend of around £9 million, most of which, if not all, I think is down to looked after children. So I think if Phil could perhaps address or one of his colleagues could address the financial one first, and then Farah, we could move on to you perhaps to talk about the sufficiency strategy. That's all right. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So the report in front of the Scrutiny Board is the report that went through to Executive Board that sets out our initial projections and our monitoring report of financial health. Just by way of reminder, this is a projection for at year end, which is undertaken at the end of period 2. We've taken this report to Executive Board earlier than we would do ordinarily. We'd ordinarily take it a bit later in the year, but because of the financial pressures that the council is under, we've brought it forward. As the chair says, it is early in the year, but we are at this stage highlighting the potential overspend position of the directorate in the region of £9 million. Again, as the chair has indicated, there are a number of pressures. The pressures that exist are not unfamiliar to us within the directorate and have been the subject of conversation here at the board previously. Cost of children looked after, particularly in terms of external residential, which is both a demand and a complexity of demand issue. There are pressures in relation to transport, which again reflect the increased level of demand in relation to SEND and EHCPs. And then there's also some additional cost pressures in relation to the assessment of SEND and EHCPs. Those are the current main identified pressures in the directorate. As you will all know, we have a very significant focus on seeking to manage the Directorate's financial resources given the pressures that exist. It's a subject of continual review within the Directorate. It's very closely working with colleagues in finance and Victoria Bradshaw's team to work very closely with us, and then it is subject to a significant amount of member interaction, both with the executive member, Councillor Hayden, and with the executive member for resources, Councillor Cooper. I'll probably pause there in terms of a general overview. I don't know whether you want to take questions on that or hand over straight to Farah, Chair.
Just before we move on directly to Farah, I just wondered if Councillor Hayden would like to say anything at all on the financial sort of side of it first.
Yes, I mean, the report sets out the current budget pressures and variances, along with the actions we're taking to manage these, as Phil has talked about. There's both local demand pressures, especially in relation, as you said, to placements and SEND, and the continued impact of national funding constraints. The financial context remains incredibly challenging. We welcome the National Fair Funding Review consultation, which is hoped will bring greater sustainability and fairness to local government finance. And we also look forward to the SEND white paper, which the government has committed to bring forward later in the year, and which we hope will provide clarity and long-term reform to support children with additional needs, because that is another cost pressure within our finances. We do continually engage with government on these positive policy developments to ensure the interests of children and families in Leeds are representative, in particular in relation to funding for high need services and the wider children's agenda, and we're constantly talking to government ministers and the Secretary of State about the various issues. So am I okay to hand over to Farah now?
Just wanted to sort of emphasise before we hand on to Farah, do appreciate it's very, very earlier in the year yet, and it is on the working programme for later in the year in September, when we look at the first quarter, which will possibly give us a better picture of what's likely to happen. I mean, essentially, there's a £9 million overspend forecast. All of that, I think, is down to children looked after. Although I know I appreciate that. But looking at the report we've been sort of given, I particularly interested in, although the children looked after figure seems to remain stable for a while, the number of children looked after elsewhere outside of Leeds has gone up quite considerably since March last year, which of course is a very expensive sort of outcome for us. So I don't want you to think we want you to go through everything today. We do appreciate it's very early in the year, but I would like your comments on whether you think that the sufficiency strategy is robust enough given, the problems that you're already experiencing. Thanks, Farah.
Thank you, Chair. I'll give a brief overview, but also my colleague Ben Finlay, Chief Officer for Corporate Parenting, has joined as well, so happy to take questions. Our sufficiency strategy is ambitious. We have one of the most ambitious sufficiency strategies in the country, recognising that we're a core city. We have challenges of core cities comparatively to other core cities, as you've recognised, Chair. We have kept those numbers stable. The sufficiency strategy addresses our ambition to have children move into our own placements. We recognise, as is recognised nationally, that children in external placement cost us, but also cost outcomes for those children. We want Leeds children to be closer to Leeds, be closer to their homes. I'm not going to go into detail about the several strands in the strategy, which is about increasing our own foster care cohort, our residential small group living homes and complex needs home, which we have done successfully, and also about support for kinship carers. But there's another side to this that isn't covered in the sufficiency strategy, which is about supporting children to remain in their families. That preventative work, which I'm really proud of, which we continue to do in Leeds, to keep children at home in families. We are not a pathfinder for the Families First partnership. However, through the Leeds Children's Safeguarding Partnership, we are progressing with
family help, which is about supporting children at home with families. So you asked how we, about keeping the numbers of looked after children stable. That is a success of that working together, that preventative offer, really understanding the needs in our communities where we see the most looked after children coming into care. There are lots of factors that are out of our control, so this isn't just, this isn't just a children's services issue. We are working across the board with partners in the council, but also externally. So we have support from colleagues in the ICB. There are factors that impact on children's lives, that then impact on parenting, that then impact on the needs and complexity of children. We are also working with the DFE on national changes and other local authorities across the country to learn and share learning, which is really important because this is a problem that most local authorities, if not all, face. So I'm confident in our sufficiency strategy, but we keep tight oversight of it as well. So we take new learning, new ideas, anything people share, we do the same to look at really expanding our offer. Ultimately, for us, it's been our strategy for a long time and our obsessions under the Children and Young People's Plan, where children remain safely at home with families, where we support them to do so, reducing the number of looked after children. Education is a key factor, so we see children who are SEND also are more at risk of likely to come into care. So Dan and I work closely together on prioritising those children for support and with our education colleagues. I just wanted to give you an overview of the complexity of the issue and the factors, some that are in our control, some that aren't, but I'm confident about our tight oversight, adapting the strategy and also looking at and meeting and understanding the demand in Leeds. I think I'll leave it there because I'm conscious of time and we're happy to take questions if that's okay.
Thanks, Farah. Councillor Blackburn, was your query about purely the financial side? Yeah, would you like to come in now then?
I'm not asking for reasons why, because I know what the reasons why we've got going to have this overspend. But I mean, we had a budget in February that we were told were robust and would work, and then 2 months in on that budget in May, we're forecasting 9.4. I think it's 9.4 million into overspend. I mean, I'm not saying this to you because I said it's same at adults actually, but the point is surely what's happened we knew probably were going to happen. So how robust are the information we're working on when we set our budget?
Barra or Phil, do you want to take it?
Chair, it's a valid question from Councillor Blackburn. I don't want to get into the technicalities of the budget setting process, but the budget setting process takes place over many months. And so, for example, for next year's process, we're already in the conversations around the medium-term financial strategy and what's built into next year. So when we built the budget, we actually built the budget on the basis of known information at that time that we genuinely felt reflected the demand pressures in the system. What's happened as that then culminates in the conversation and the discussion at the annual budget setting in February. But there's a considerable time lag, as you can see, between when we start to set the budget process actually culminating in the February budget process and then getting to this part of the year. And what we've seen through that process, unfortunately, is an increased level of demand, which to a certain extent you could make an argument that we might have been better in terms of our modelling on that. I think there are lots of areas of complexity that Farah has set out on that. But what we're also seeing, though, is the increased level of that complexity. That complexity of demand is what drives the additional cost. So it isn't just a purely X number of children more. It's the complexity of the needs that we're having to address for those children. We continue to operate in fundamentally a broken social care market for external residential where costs continue to increase year on year. There are continuing issues around the viability of local government as a sector as a whole to be able to manage those cost pressures, and we are not immune from that. Whilst we have an average external residential cost that has risen from roughly about £6,600 to approaching £7,000. We're seeing much more significant cost increases on that when you've got those children with real complex needs, and that is effectively what's tipping over into the cost pressures that you're seeing now. I'd also just seek to clarify, just for absolute certainty, that the whole £9 million is not related to external residential. There's about £6 or £7 million which is related to external residential, and then there are some other pressures encapsulated in that £9 million. If I pause there and see if there's any points on that.
Thanks, Phil. Just as an addition to that, it's sort of linked to what Councillor Blackburn said. Although the numbers remain relatively stable, the number of children looked after outside of Leeds has gone up by 29, I think from 134 to 163 since March last year, and that's one of the largest expenses I think you have as a directorate. I'm particularly interested as to whether that's a consistent or a slowly growing figure, whether it's a blip or whether it's a sign for the future, basically, that if this is going to keep on increasing, that's going to have a pretty devastating effect on the budgets. So, do you want that, Farah, or do you want to pass it on to Ben or Phil?
Thank you, Chair. Close enough. I think the figures for children living in placements we don't provide have been relatively static over the last sort of 6 to 8 months. So I think the concern that what we're going to see is an ongoing inflation in those figures. I think we can offer some reassurance that we're not seeing that so far, and we've seen some stabilisation of those numbers and a marginal reduction more recently. Probably important to say too that those are placements we don't provide, so they're referred to as external for that reason, not that they're necessarily outside the city. So there are a significant number of providers in the city who provide care, and we are seeking to increase our use of those spaces for Leeds children, so that we keep them in their community. Doesn't necessarily change significantly the financing of that, but it does significantly improve outcomes for those children. A lot of our activity when we're thinking about our children's home provision is focused on children who are living outside of Leeds and seeking to increase the number of children who can move back. We have seen a change from latter half of last year into this year, where we've seen that increase. But I think before that we'd seen an improvement, and I'm confident that we can do that. We have some strategies in place to address that already, and they will start to show an overall reduction in the number of external placements, assuming, of course, that we don't see significant new demand coming into the system. And so we have a lot of activity and a lot of work focused on trying to manage new demand for care placements into the system, either by supporting the arrangements children currently have, or by making sure that we support their families to look after them in a creative, imaginative way, but in a way that ultimately improves their outcomes and safeguards them.
Thanks, Ben. Councillor Blackburn, would you like to come back?
My concern and with this, I mean, every year we're getting this, where we're getting 2 or 3 months into the year, and then we're finding we've got a black hole, effectively. I mean, what my concerns me is one day, and that day might be getting nearer with every year that goes by, we're going to find we've got the black hole and cupboard is bare, and I don't want to see that. So if we can do anything to try and make sure our forecasting is better than it is, we need to do it.
Thanks very much indeed, Councillor Blackburn. None of us like black holes. Are there any other questions or comments on this item? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Well, we move on to the recommendation. Recommendations, I should say. Members are asked to note the content of the report and appendices setting out the month 2 financial position of the Council, and specifically the Children and Families Directorate. Board members, secondly, are asked to highlight any future areas of scrutiny work should any arise during discussion of this item. We do have it again on the agenda in September, so it will come up again when we'll be looking at the first sort of quarter. So we're going to have someone to move the recommendations be accepted. Councillor Blackburn, seconded. Councillor Renshaw. All in favour? Any against? Thank you very much indeed. Can move on to the next item, which is the Youth Justice Plan. Who's going to lead on this one?
I'll start if that's okay, Chair. So this is the Youth Justice Plan update, and I'll just wait for colleagues to join us. I'm really proud of the work that around youth justice that's done in the city. When I first came into post, we had one of the first things we had an event to acknowledge the incredible work done by partners in the city after the JTI report, so the joint targeted inspection, which involved Ofsted, CQC, probation, inspectorate across the board. I would think that the Youth Justice Board meetings would be one of my more depressing meetings that I go to, but it's incredibly inspiring and uplifting, and the amount of expertise and professionalism, compassion and just dedication to getting things right for our children and young people, prevention of young people becoming involved in the youth justice system at all. So I just want to pay tribute to Helen in particular, but for all the work she does and her innovative thinking, her ability to take risks for our young people, try out new things, and is really inspiring, supported with the rest of the team. And hopefully she feels supported by all of us. I'm especially proud of the child first practices that our Youth Justice Partnership is dedicated to, our commitment to tackling disproportionality and racial disparity within the youth justice system. We have some fantastic work in Leeds. I particularly highlight the focus on strengthening support around children and young people at risk, particularly outside the home, so the Roth pathway that Helen brought to the city, and recognising that parents struggle as much as professionals, and supporting parents in protecting their children. So engaging parents, carers, families at the earliest opportunity, and recognising that protective role they play, but also that they need our support and we need their support, and working in partnership. So I'd just like to thank everyone, to all our partners and staff, and the staff that work with our young people and their families day in, day out, and their commitment. It's really, really impressive. And if you ever get a chance to actually see some of the work that's get done, then I would recommend it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Will it be Helen or Jacinta that are going to lead on this?
Thank you. So I'd like to introduce the Youth Justice Plan for the forthcoming year. Within the plan document, we outline progress on the priorities for the service over the last 12 months, and outline our plan for the next 12 months. As Councillor Hayden has said, we have an absolute commitment to preventing children from entering the criminal justice system. We are bringing the bar lower and lower in terms of the work that we're doing to try and get in there as early as we can do for children. And over the next 12 months, we will continue to work in that vein with further innovative ideas about what we can do for children in the city. We have seen really positive impact from our preventative work, particularly in the work of the turnaround team, where we are seeing lower rates of reoffending. We are building upon that work with the hope that we can reduce the number of children who come to us on a statutory basis, and really try to turn things around for children in our city. As Councillor Hayden's mentioned, we are very focused on disproportionality and reducing racial injustices for our children. We are working very closely with West Yorkshire Police in piloting some recommendations from some national research to really try and tackle that area. And we do retain a continued focus on disproportionality at every, I suppose, entry level to the justice system, particularly focusing on children within who are in custody. Over the next 12 months, we really want to try and reduce the numbers of children in custody. We particularly want to focus on developing community alternatives to custody for children, particularly for those on remand. So we have lots of work to do over the next 12 months, but there is a real commitment and a real, I suppose, energy across the partnership to really kind of employ child-first practices to assist us in doing that, because I'm acutely conscious that we can't do it alone in the Youth Justice Service. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. Does anybody have any questions or queries, comments? Okay.
Yeah, I'd echo what Councillor Hayden says. I attend the Youth Justice Board and I'm very impressed with the work that's being done. And just to sort of link in, so one report that's just come out this week pretty much from the Youth Justice Board nationally, from their bulletin, is some work around from the Wokingham Exclusion Prevention Programme. So it's quite innovative, but really important in terms of like linking schools and neurodiversity as an issue that is perhaps becoming more to the fore, but also linking everything together so that it's a very preventative approach. And I think that's really important. If we can sort of learn from that, it seems to work in Wokingham, and it maybe we ask them to come and explain what they're doing to make it so effective. But it does require a lot of work with schools to make sure that the schools actually embed assessments that look at neurodiversity, autism and ADHD as well, so that children are not labelled as being children who commit offences and so on, but they're actually mostly victims. So I had a mother come to see me last week whose child was autistic and was being bullied at school, and that child got sent into isolation in the school. And so she took him out, basically, and sent him to Pivot instead. So, and that sort of thing shouldn't be happening, but it does. And we need to sort of challenge that as much as we can. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. One question from me, it's about knife crime. You do cover it briefly in the report, but I just wondered what, if you could expand on that in terms of the issues in the city, and particularly from the police sort of perspective.
Certainly, I suppose I'll answer what I can, but I'm conscious that I can't necessarily represent the police perspective per se. You know, we are absolutely committed to tackling knife crime. We work on a child-first basis, so we work on understanding what's underpinning the, I guess, offending behaviours that are presenting. So if we, for example, are working with a child who is carrying a weapon, we want to understand why is that child carrying a weapon in order to tackle that, to create safety for the child. In terms of the wider city, you know, there are concerns about exploitation of our children, and there are concerns in terms of organised crime and the exploitation of children through that, which we do work very closely as a partnership. And the JTI inspection that we had last year did highlight some of the positive work in the city from a partnership perspective in terms of addressing serious violence and knife crime. It's a continued I guess, area of concern for us, for our children. It's the safety of our children, communities and victims, and many of our children are victims themselves of knife crime. So it continues to be a focus of the work that we're doing. We do also deliver some programmes where appropriate for our children, where we help them to understand the consequences of knife crime. We've done some innovative work over the last 12 months jointly with the courts and West Yorkshire Police to look at some preventative work, which involved children going to the courts, listening to people with lived experience, that was really successful, and it's something that we are kind of looking to roll out on a more regular basis. So we are really trying to look at different ways that we can address knife crime, but ultimately we want to get underneath what is the reason for children carrying knives and how can we stop that, because only if we do that will we actually have an impact.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Flint.
I just wondered if you have an opportunity to work with the education team and maybe even input nationally around misogyny. So I know that the government have recently announced there will be kind of more joined up misogyny education in secondary schools, although there's definitely an argument for it to be made earlier. But just obviously with your expertise about the consequences of, absorbing a lot about incel culture and all that's available to our young people, and the consequences then that has on young people's actions, if there's chance for you to sort of feed that in to how that education is, how it's developed, but then how it's kind of brought out in Leeds, because it feels like that's so important to sort of crime further down the line, what young people understanding all the stuff that they're absorbing. So
I think this is very much an emerging area of practice that we are, I suppose, grappling with. We work very closely with Prevent colleagues in identifying and understanding children. In terms of the education aspect, we do work jointly with our education colleagues who sit on our partnership board, so where we're identifying themes and issues, that does feed directly through to our education colleagues, but I don't know if there's anything.
This is about early identification, because what we know is where children are groomed and exploited into things like misogynistic views, hateful views, far-right views, they're more likely to be involved in gangs and criminal exploitation, etc. later. We've had some really good pockets of work that have been done with particular schools around using a mentoring model, in particular about misogyny, but also that challenge of those views, perceptions of young people. But there's more to do in that space, and how we link up and learn, because there has been some particular pockets of successes. I wanted to just speak about the knife crime and education part as well. So I know the police from last year after Operation Shield have continued the work within schools about raising awareness of knife crime. I went to Glasgow last year because they've really managed to reduce the numbers of knife crime, to learn from them as well about that work, and as part of the multi-agency child exploitation arrangements, we're going to have a workshop approach in September to look at some new learning around how, as a partnership, we manage knife crime through the lens of seeing the child as the victim. So children who carry knives are often children who have been exploited by gangs, by adults. So kind of following on those themes, and misogyny is absolutely a part of that preventative space and those discussions. So they're, like Helen said, it's a new and emerging world. We're seeing more online exploitation in various forms that as adults we struggle to keep up with. So it's using children's knowledge and that connections with children, understanding children, to really build that picture, but absolutely as part of, I suppose, the public health model to preventative, serious youth violence as a preventative issue. We're absolutely focused on that, and schools will have a role to play in that. We, one of our principles is education as a protective factor. Children who are out of school are more likely to be exploited, are more likely to be involved in crime. So Dan and I are working closely on that.
Councillor Flint.
Yeah, because we know that misogyny being categorised as a hate crime is coming like that. So that will then produce more crimes that you can be convicted of, which is a good thing, but also we just need to be aware of that, don't we? So the prevention work is kind of extra important to keep kids out of the criminal system. But for Councillor Halen, we were looking at having a round table around education and misogyny, so it'd be really good to invite someone from the Youth Justice Board.
Come in, Chair. So the guidance came in from the government last week. education officers and healthy schools officers are absorbing that information to then and look, and what we're planning, it's in the early stages, is in the autumn, quite I think it will be possibly bigger than a round table, because that's the way my brain works, but of bringing everything together, because there's a lot of good stuff happening in schools already. I'd like to congratulate Benton Park on receiving a gold award for a national gold award, only one of 4 schools nationally to receive this gold award. I can't remember the title now, but it was around combating misogyny, and so there's already work going on in the city. There needs to be more. We're getting national guidance and directive. I think that's an excellent point about involving youth justice and just their expertise in the preventative and then justice space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Councillor Manaka.
Thank you, Chair. Just touching upon a lot of what has been said with regards to this paper. Regards to youth justice system. Really, really lovely for me to attend yesterday's corporate parenting board and hearing a lot of what, what is there already, like the Adelbeck, centre that's really, really working hard in terms of what they do. That was really, really impressive. Obviously, we do not wish to see any of the children in Leeds being in, such units and places, but the work they do, really, really appreciate that. And I'm just looking at the paper priorities, really welcome them, because as a councillor that sits in a really highly deprived area and seeing a lot of crime and everything, I really appreciate this report, and it would be great to also, I see that under the priority